The funeral mass for Pope Francis has been held at the Vatican in Rome in remembrance of a spiritual leader who stood up for peace, acceptance and humility wherever he went. A procession has transported the Pope's coffin through Rome to his favourite church, where he's to be buried after a short ceremony. It follows a mass in St. Peter's Square attended by an estimated 250,000 people, including some 50 heads of state and 10 monarchs. After leading the Catholic Church for 12 years, Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, died on Easter Monday from a stroke while recovering at home from pneumonia. He was 88. DW's Jack Parrock has followed the ceremony from inside the Vatican. A privileged viewpoint. Jack, what did you see?
Yeah, it was a really powerful thing to stand and witness. I was there on St. Peter's Square for much of the funeral ceremony. Many people stood there to pay their respects to the Pope. There were tears in many of their eyes. Some people stood quietly participating in the songs and the prayers as it moved through. The vision of what was a very simple wooden coffin stood outside the Basilica of the Vatican amongst the world's leaders, as well as all of the senior cardinals from the Catholic Church, and then the huge amount of people lining St. Peter's Square and all the roads running up to it, to just be there to witness this really important moment for the faithful, for the Catholic faithful who'd come to attend, but also for the world, as this papacy of Pope Francis, which was marked by a sort of commitment to evangelizing and missionary work for the Church, this comes to an end with his funeral and his death.
What have pilgrims been telling you after travelling so far to see him with their own eyes?
Do you know what? One of the most interesting things that I heard was from a Filipino nun who I spoke to a little bit earlier this morning. And obviously for her, Pope Francis was a major person in not only in her spiritual faith, but in her life. It's a devotion to the Church. And she said that for her, Pope Francis wasn't just a figurehead of the Church, he was a leader of their spiritual life, and that is what changes now, and that for her, she really hopes that there would be someone that could replace Francis in that role, not just as a figurehead of the Catholic Church, but also as a spiritual leader. On the St. Peter's Square, I spoke to actually a number of different children, quite interesting, sort of maybe 10 to 15 years old, some of these, that were stood in the blazing sun beating down on them. They said, you know, this is quite a long service for them to sit through. And I don't think that they quite understand the weight of what they might have experienced here, and they will in the coming years. But a lot of them thought that Pope Francis was, and one of them said to me, was a really nice man. And that's sort of the energy that he tried to give off. He wanted to be kind and friendly and encouraged all of the Catholic faithful to follow in his example as well.
This has also been a mammoth security operation with so many heads of state and monarchs attending. How has it been pulled off? How did it go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Catholic Church and the Roman authorities will be very pleased that this appears, from what we've seen, to have gone off without a hitch. It's been very smooth. I don't know how much you can see behind me, but there's police cars and cordons that actually just in the last 20 minutes or so, as the ceremony wrapped up, have started to be released. But those cordons all around the Vatican, all the roads around here, in order to pass the checkpoints, you've had to have a particular pass and to move on to different sections of the square. You can hear above me, perhaps, the helicopters that have been flying over Rome for the last 24 hours. We know that Italy's Eurofighter fighter jets are on standby for any issues that were to take place or could have happened. The Italian Navy has installed frigates as close as possible on the Italian coast to Rome. This has been an enormous operation to make sure that the focus of this funeral was on the religious aspect of it and not on anything else. And I think so far we've just seen that the coffin is arriving at Santa Maria Maggiore, the basilica where Pope Francis will be buried. But so far up until this point, it looks like, as I say, it's run as smoothly as they perhaps could have hoped.
DW's Jack Parrock reporting from the Vatican there. And let's take you to that church where the coffin's arriving. DW correspondent Giulia Saudelli met the Pope when he was first elected, covering the conclave, and you're there to cover his funeral. What's it been like?
Yeah, it was a touching moment to see his coffin drive by right here beside us together with the crowd. He has just arrived briefly about 10 minutes ahead of our conversation right now, and he is now inside the basilica right there, and they are preparing the rituals to actually put him to rest and where his last resting place is going to be. And the crowd erupted in applause when the coffin drove by. People were getting really emotional. There were tears, and it was just generally a communion of people coming together to pay their respects to someone, to a pontiff that many people here really looked up to, and who they really felt was a man of the people, one of them.
Tell us more about the church he chose as his final resting place, Giulia.
Yes, this is one of Rome's four papal basilicas, Santa Maria Maggiore. It is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and this is a church that was very close to the heart of Pope Francis. He would come here to pray after every foreign trip that he took. There were many of those, to be closer to God, to be closer to the Virgin Mary, and to find solace and to reflect. And it was 3 years ago when he decided, after he said that the Virgin Mary came to him in a dream, that he wanted to be buried here, something that was a different kind of plan compared to what had happened over the last century, where popes were normally buried in the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Francis decided to be laid to rest in his favorite church here in the city of Rome.
Our very own Giulia Saudelli, thank you very much for your coverage. And let's take you now to the Philippines, an Asian bastion of Catholicism. Journalist Dave Grunebaum joins me from the Immaculate Conception Cathedral of Cubao in Quezon City. Dave, you were following the service from there. How was it received?
Well, certainly a solemn moment for so many people. People came here to gather and watch the funeral together on some screens that they had set up here because they wanted to share this moment with each other and, of course, with Catholics around the world. Of course, obviously a beautiful setting in the Vatican for such a historical event that's steeped in tradition, as well as for here, a really beautiful setting. People really wanted to feel this together with a Pope that they really did feel a connection to, somebody who fought for the impoverished and fought against corruption. And this is someone who they wanted to remember and have this moment of bonding together. It was not only a chance to say goodbye to him, but to these people here, really a celebration of his life.
He also visited a decade ago. How beloved was Pope Francis in the Philippines?
Absolutely beloved. The name they call him here is Lolo Kiko, which basically translates to Grandpa Francis here. Kiko is a common name for people here called Francis. So Lolo Kiko, and now they're missing their Lolo Kiko. He came here 10 years ago after this country suffered a devastating typhoon that killed thousands, left thousands more homeless, and he held a mass with many survivors of that typhoon, a mass that was in the pouring rain. And people said that time you really felt the connection with him, that he really felt their pain. And during that trip to the Philippines, he called on this country's leaders to do something about the corruption, because that's what he stood for, fighting against social injustice. And these people here are truly, truly grateful to him.
The other interesting thing is that a Filipino is one of the contenders for the next Pope. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Cardinal Tagle. He is also somebody that is beloved here. He likes to go by his nickname, Cheeto. And he is often called the Asian Francis because he also fights against social injustice. You know, he comes from a more liberal side of the Catholic Church. He's often been critical of how the Catholic Church has treated people from the LGBT community, how it's treated single mothers, how it's treated people who are divorced. He said that, the church needs to be more inclusive. Now, obviously this country is 80% Catholic. So if a Filipino were named the next pope, it would be a huge deal for so many people in this country. And it would make him, if that were to happen, the first Asian pontiff. But of course, people say you don't want to be campaigning too hard for something like that. It just doesn't help. But clearly, so many people here are quietly hoping that he'll become the next pope.
In the Philippines, journalist Dave Grunebaum there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.